there being an alley, but we can see individual people. We can make out features of cars. It adds much more context, much more story, but at the same time, many more distractions away from the main subject. So, as a photographer, you get to choose the f-stop number, and that's part of the creative control that you get. For detailed information about how to use aperture and f-stop numbers, visit this URL for another free video, sdp.io/fstop. Just another video on our channel. It's completely free. To control your aperture, of course, you'll be in aperture priority mode, as I showed you. And just going to make sure the camera's awake. As we look at the back of the screen here, it's showing me 3 different settings. The shutter speed on the left, the aperture in the middle, and the ISO on the right. So I can easily change the aperture in aperture priority mode by using the main dial here. This is the main dial underneath your thumb. If I twist it to the right, you can see the f-stop number gets higher and higher. It's actually visually showing me what the aperture looks like. It's getting smaller and smaller. If I scroll to the left, the f number gets smaller. Now you can see, if I scroll to the left, it won't go lower than f5.6. That's because this lens is an f5.6 lens. You can actually look on the front here. You see it says 18 to 55, f3.5 to f5.6. There's 2 different ranges there. At 18 millimeters, the minimum f-stop number is f3.5. At 55 millimeters, the minimum f-stop number is f5.6. I'm at 55 right now, which means I can't go below f5.6. If I zoom back to 18, suddenly I can scroll down and go all the way to f3.5. Different lenses will allow you to select lower f-stop numbers. For example, if you pick up this wonderful 50 millimeter f1.8 and put it on there, you'll be able to go select an f-stop number all the way down to f1.8, which will give you more low light gathering capability, which will give you more light gathering capabilities in low light and allow you to blur the background more. So you are kind of limited to the f-stop range that your particular lens supports. If, for whatever reason, you just prefer using the touchscreen, you'll see the little left and right arrow there. You can select that and just go up or down. But it's kind of better if you get used to using the main dial. It's just easier to use. Let's go on and talk about shutter priority. While the aperture controls the amount of light that comes in by opening and closing the iris, the shutter controls the amount of light that enters the camera by determining how long that shutter opens up. The shutter is more like your eyelids of your eyes. So when the shutter's closed, which is most of the time, it'll open when you take a picture and stay open for the amount of time that it determines it needs to gather the right amount of light, and then it closes again. If you're in aperture priority mode, the camera will just take care of that for you automatically and determine, it'll look at the scene and be like, oh, it's pretty bright, I don't need to have the shutter open that long. But if you decide you want to take control of the shutter, what you'll do is you'll move this main dial over to, the mode dial over to S, and then you'll move the main dial up or down. You can see now it's at 1/4 of a second. I can go all the way down to 1 full second. That's what 1 quote mark means. Or I can keep going to the left and do like a 30-second exposure. The only reason you do a 30-second exposure is if you're taking pictures at night, maybe you have stars, and you have the camera on a tripod to keep it from shaking around. Most of the time, you're going to be in the range of like 1/60th of a second, 1/30th of a second. 1/30th is okay for like still portraits if you're in a dim environment. Though for most part, I'd rather be taking portraits at 1/60th. If you're taking pictures of active kids, you probably want to be at 1/125th or 1/250th. 1/250th is good for kids sports too, but if you get into like middle school, high school sports, sometimes you need to go a little faster, go up to like 1/500th. And if you get into wildlife photography, things like flying birds, you probably want to be at like 1/1600th, 1/2000th, or even 1/2500th. You probably don't need to often go above that, but if you're taking pictures of hummingbirds maybe, and you want to freeze those wings, you could get up to a full maximum shutter speed of 1/4000th of a second. Just as before, you can adjust the shutter speed by using the touchscreen if you so choose, but again, that main dial really is much, much easier to use. Now, both the shutter speed and the aperture separately control the amount of light that's entering the camera. So in aperture priority, you control the aperture, the camera controls the shutter speed. In shutter priority, you control the shutter speed, the camera controls the aperture, so those two things kind of balance. Controlling shutter is a key part of storytelling in photography, and it's a creative choice that you as a photographer have. Here's 3 pictures of my daughter as a sample. We're both on one of those spinning merry-go-round things, and I'm facing her. So at 1/8 of a second, we're both spinning at the same speed in all these pictures, but at 1/8 of a second, you can see the background is nice and blurred because we're moving. She remains still because she's moving at the same speed as me. This tells a story. It tells a story that we're on a merry-go-round and spinning. If I increase that shutter speed, if I make it faster and go to 1/30th of a second, you can see the background still visibly moving. But it's not as much. It's not as nicely blurred. If I go all the way up to 1/125th of a second, it no longer looks like we're moving, but we are. You just can't see it anymore. That's the creative storytelling. You can see if the camera chose, if I let the camera decide, it probably would have chosen 1/125th or faster. And you never would have known what we were doing. You wouldn't even know we were on a merry-go-round at all. So that's the kind of thing that you need to think about as a photographer. The shutter speed that you want to the maximum amount of editing done and get the most perfect pictures possible. So we have books on those. If you're baffled by which lens and camera to buy for different situations like portraits and sports, or if you want to get studio lighting for professional portraiture, check out my photography buying guide. Again, the ebook versions are all $10. The paperbacks are a little bit more, but you have both those options. I'm just going to throw out a few links here for you to explore in case you wanted to dive deeper into different genres of photography. If you want to check out night photography, taking pictures at night, visit sdp.io/np. If you want to get into landscape photography, sdp.io/ls. Wildlife photography.
Not to brag, but I just switched to Verizon.
Wow.
And I got to choose the phone I wanted for
Vacation is Hyundai Tucson with America's best warranty.
LS. Wildlife photography, sdp.io/wl.
Busog na.
Into bulb mode, which actually comes up a lot in night photography. Bulb mode is, the term comes from the old film days where you would actually use a bulb that was a shutter trigger, and you could kind of lock the bulb down, and that would lock the shutter open. But we don't have to use the bulb anymore. It's still called bulb mode generically, though. And what bulb mode does is allows you to keep the shutter open longer than 30 seconds. So I'm still in manual mode. If I scroll this all the way to turn hey Siri, I set an alarm for 2 minutes, and then after 2 minutes you can come back and just push that shutter again, and it will close it. So you don't have to. Siri was actually listening to me. That's funny, see? Siri's on the ball. The other option for using the shutter is to use a self-timer. So there are a couple of reasons you want to use a self-timer. You might be taking a selfie with your family, and you'll set the camera up on a tripod, and you'll flip that screen around, and then you'll hit the shutter, and you'll run behind your family and put your arm around them. To use the self-timer, what you'll do is there's a button on the front here. See it looks like a stack of copies, and then this little clock icon. You push that, and now you'll be able to select the self-timer here. You can see this one is set to 10 seconds. So I'll select that. And now it's a 10-second self-timer, so if I hit that button, it'll beep like that for 10 seconds. It'll change the space as it gets near the end. And then finally, after 10 seconds, click. Now, the 10-second self-timer is good for putting your
What's that?
You can also
What's
select
that?
the self-timer. If you have the
Pansit.
tripod and
What's
you want
that?
to eliminate the camera shape that you get
What's
by
that?
actually pushing the shutter.
Pansit.
In macro photography where you take close-up pictures, or
Pansit.
photography where you have to use a long shutter speed. So this will just make your pictures a little sharper if you use this type of self-timer. So I'll hit the menu button here. I don't know, it doesn't need to be 10 seconds. If you're doing that, it only needs to be like 2 seconds. So I'll set it to a shorter self-timer so I don't have to stand there for 10 seconds. With the pencil icon selected in the menus, I'll scroll down to C, timers, /AUR, and then go down to C3, I'll scroll to the right, and you can see self-timer delay. I can just set that to 2 seconds. So again, 10 seconds for putting your arm around your family, or 2 seconds for eliminating camera shake when you're using the camera on a tripod. Now with that set to 2 seconds, I can hit this timer button up here. And you can see if I do select self-timer, it's the 2-second variety. Now let's talk about the different shutter modes.
Tapos ka na.
When you push the shutter all the way, it's going going to take one picture. And even if I hold it down, it's still only going to take that one picture. If you're shooting sports, you probably want to take a picture as fast as possible, and trying to take pictures like that would be just way too slow.